let's get into .NET 8 and what all the announcements were. So I'm going to touch on, and if you've vigorously watched all the content from .NET Conf, then you're going to see some of these slides and visualizations that look pretty familiar, and that's fine because we're going across the announcements, and I want to interpret them and tell you how you should think about them and how it's going to potentially change the way um, you set up your software architecturally. So with .NET 8, there's a lot of history that's come together and some pieces that have finally fallen into place that started with the .NET Core era, where .NET Framework 4.8, they said, you know what, we need .NET to be cross-platform and not just Windows. That was a big thing. So .NET Core was born, but in the process, a lot of things got split. WinForms and WPF were left out of .NET Core initially, and then of course .NET 5. It was .NET Core 3, .NET Core 3.1, and then instead of a .NET Core 4, we jumped to just .NET 5 because we had .NET Framework 4.8. We didn't want to do, when I say we, Microsoft, the industry. Um, and so we went to 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now, in the process, everything has come back together, and the only disparity left with what you can't do with .NET 8 and the .NET Core lineage that you might be able to do with .NET Framework comes down to dependencies and libraries. If you're controlling some specific hardware that has an SDK or a library that was built with .NET Framework, and that vendor has not given an SDK or a library to control that hardware with .NET Core, those are the types of things that are going to hold you up. It's dependencies. It's not the type of software. Um, and so all of the modern workloads can be handled with .NET 8. Any type of client, whether it's Windows, Mac, um, Android, iOS, even the system on a chip, Raspberry Pi, bespoke, bespoke boards that need to run in an IoT manner. Um, the artificial intelligence is kind of new and expanded from last year, and then of course cloud native. And from a developer productivity perspective, we'll touch on what you need to think about from a language perspective. And then .NET 8, they worked on a lot of fundamentals with performance. So performance is improved all around. And we'll talk about one of those that really does impact you. But this has been the focus of .NET 8. All right. Um, so let's touch on Maui, which is the way to create smartphone applications, Mac applications, and then of course if you're targeting WinUI. All right. Um, Maui, the biggest change architecturally is the single project system, the single code base. And the second to that is making Blazor hybrid apps a first-class citizen and really targeting that. I'll talk about Blazor in general in just a bit, but um, with Maui going to a single project system, this is big. This is something that was a little bit more difficult in the past, where you had different projects for Android, different or now you can create a Maui application that's a part of an existing Visual Studio application, and it's just another top level project. It's just another project that has a program.cs. In this case, it's Maui program.cs. And so that's big. They've done a lot of work to consolidate it down. And inside the platforms folder, you see iOS, Android, etc. And this is what it looks like. So when you think about putting together an application, any of your existing applications, you can just add a Maui project to. Now, you could in the past, but it was clunky and your developers really had to train up. They've simplified it big time. Okay, so this is one thing to consider. Do you have an existing Visual Studio solution with a distributed application, and maybe you have a WinForms WPF client, maybe you have a web application client, and you know what? Yes, you could expose some web services, um, and then have a different Git repository for this Maui application, certainly you can do that. But if you've said, oh, it's not really worth it, we just want to have a few of these functions for the Maui application. Well, now consider doing a proof of concept. Just do a feature branch and allocate a couple days and assign somebody to add a Maui project to your existing Visual Studio application and see what it would take to get your existing application enabled on an iPhone app or enabled on an Android app. Not the whole application, but maybe a few functions where it would be beneficial for whoever uses it to have those functions in their pocket. So that's that's a big change, a big simplification, and I predict that it'll help a lot of developers who kind of been on the sidelines from a smartphone perspective kind of jump in here because of how simple it's made it.